So the purpose of a planned economy is to increase the production of the means of production. Just think about it. It's actually quite intuitive. Let's say that these 10 people here were producing tractors, and the rest of us were all peasants and we were working the fields. Now, in a capitalist economy, those 10 people would only produce enough tractors that they can sell them at a profit, right? And that is what is going to determine how many tractors are produced, when they are produced, and how they are sold. If we now suddenly overthrow the capitalist government and we have a socialist society, we can decide, all right, it's not going to be 10 people that are going to be producing tractors. Why not get all these 50 people on this side of the room to produce tractors? And in fact, let's forget about producing these tractors for a profit. For a profit, we could produce maybe 50 tractors a year. Now we are going to produce 150 tractors a year. Moreover, we're just going to give them out for free. And anyone that organizes a collective farm can get a tractor. Now, every single tractor, for a capitalist economist, that doesn't make any sense. He's going to say, well, the tractor factory is running at a loss. You're not making any profit. There's no incentive. It's coming apart. Oh, the world is falling, etc. But think about it from the point of view of the entire economy. When there were 50 tractors produced only, or 5 or whatever the number it is that I spoke about earlier, the growth, the growth out of 50 tractors was going to be, let's say, 100%. Now that there are going to be 150 or 200 tractors, the growth is going to be 3 or 4 times the amount, because those tractors are going into the field and they're going to produce that much more. It's really that simple. So, what may be an economic loss to the individual enterprise producing the means of production is in fact an enormous economic benefit enormous economic benefit to the economy as a whole. That is why during times of war, even capitalist governments decide to take key industries, nationalize them, run them at a loss, and ensure that that thing is produced, that thing that they require is produced in sufficient quantity. Mostly I'm referring to the war industry, which is never run at a profit but always under a planned economy. So this is how the Soviet Union managed to perform its economic miracles. If you read Stalin's great book, Economic Problems of Socialist Society, he says in that the way to build socialism is to take those industries that are producing consumer items, take the extra revenue from those, take that revenue and cross-subsidize those industries that are producing machines, producing the means of production. And when those means of production go back to the consumer industry, everybody's just going to grow. And that's exactly how they performed the economic miracles. In other words, Sector A industries, the ones that were producing consumer goods, were cross-subsidizing Sector B industries, the industries that were producing the means of production, the tools. It's just that simple, comrades. And so with respect to China, Vietnam, Pakistan, India, the third world, where there's a consistent problem of underdevelopment, it could be just that simple as well if we could understand this fact that we need to cross-subsidize those industries that have positive growth. And in order to do that, you need a planned economy. What happened in the Soviet Union with the rise of opportunism, what Mao Zedong called modern revisionism, was that somehow or the other these really important aspects about socialist planned economy were thrown overboard. And instead, in their place was introduced the notion that every individual enterprise, not the economy as a whole, but every individual enterprise must run at a profit. These were called the Lieberman reforms in 1965. 90,000 industrial units of the Soviet Union, some of the main industrial units, with the exception of the military, were under this plan reorganized. They were separated from the central plan, and the principles upon which they were reorganized were that the enterprise, instead of the plan, which was the case previously, the enterprise now would be the basic unit of the socialist economy. And in this, they said, in the new economy, they increased the role of profits, they increased material incentives, which basically amounted to nothing other than increasing the incentives for managers, middlemen, and technical managerial intelligentsia. They said that development funds would no longer be supplied by the Gosplan, by the central bank, by this method of cross-subsidization, but should be supplied either through loans, credit, or should be generated by the enterprises themselves. And they thought that by increasing the rights of factory managers, they could somehow or the other incentivize these factories to produce more. In fact, they did the very opposite. They slowed down their own economic growth gradually, even though still the Soviet Union grew at a phenomenal rate. But they slowed it down. They fractured up their social capital. It wouldn't be proper to call it capital, but they fractured up their social revenue into 90,000 little parts instead of centralizing it all and utilizing economies of scale, centralizing all that scientific knowledge, centralizing that revenue, utilizing economies of scale to build bigger and better things. They fractured up their social revenue into 90,000 units, which is the number of enterprises that they had at that time. And as a result, the economy slowed down. And when the economy slowed down, that slowing down of the economy, ironically, was used by what I would call liquidationists within the party that wanted to destroy the party to further justify the breakup of the Soviet Union, the breakup of socialism, the destruction of the planned economy, and the eventual destruction of the Soviet state. The lesson to be learned is that, well, first of all, let's call things by their right names. These Lieberman reforms were a step back from capitalism. They were at that time called a step forward towards socialism. Every single step back from socialism, since I'd say the 1950s, has been covered up as a step forward towards socialism. Whether that is the New Left, the Frankfurt School of Thought, whether that is the opportunists within the Communist Party, whether it is postmodernism, post-structuralism, all of these things, all this great advance, actually it's all a step backwards. It's always undertaken because of the dominance of Marxism over the entire intellectual world. It's always been justified in the name as an advance. Anyway, this retreat, which caused a slowdown in the economy of the Soviet Union, was used as a further justification for the complete breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. And we must learn from this history, and we must conduct a ruthless ideological war against those people, those trends, those political ideas that pretend to be part of the working class movement, but are actually representatives of the ruling class ideas within the working class. Thank you.
Precisely because these reforms were a step backward to capitalism rather than a step forward in the direction of what Khrushchev used to call higher stage of communism, which they were going to achieve within 15 years. That's why the bourgeoisie maligns the central planning during a Stalin period of time by some lurid stories. I mean, if you read those stories, it sounded as though Stalin had steel for breakfast, more steel for lunch, even more steel for evening meals. And this because he was the evil-minded dictator who wanted to starve Soviet people of articles of consumption. But people don't realize, as Taimur has told us, you cannot even actually expand on a large scale the production of the articles of consumption unless you've got the means of production to produce it. And what is more, the machines that produce those means of production, particularly machine building industry, metallurgical industry, chemical industries, etc. You need all those. And everything was on track in the Soviet Union, precisely why between 1928 and 1941, June 1941, when the Soviet Union was attacked, her economy has actually gone up by 10 times. But 10 times. After the devastating war, the Soviet Union rehabilitated its economy by 1948. From 1945, middle of 1945 to the end of 1948, they had rehabilitated production to the pre-war level. And from 48 to 51, 3 years later, the Soviet economy had doubled in size again. Now, the stupid idea that innovation in the Soviet Union took place because Stalin took a gun and said to the scientists, you will produce this. Try and take a gun elsewhere. I mean, everybody knows the Tsarist Russia wasn't bad in using guns. Why did innovation not come to Tsarist Russia and why to Soviet Russia? Precisely because of the collective efforts where people helped each other in solving the problem.